There is a storm brewing outside my house, and likewise, I hope that even outside your houses there's some wind which is gushing, and there is a lot of you could see droplets of water. Or it may be raining also. But I would like to welcome Senior Advocate Geeta Luthra, and she's made her time, and she's joined us. And I have Justice Iqbal Ahmed Ansari, the chairman of the Punjab Human Rights Commission, as well as a former Chief Justice of the Patna High Court. He's been kind enough to spare his time and join us today. And I have got Advocate Rubinder Ghuman joining me, who's already joined the studio. And Advocate Aman Sareen, an advocate in the Delhi High Court and the lower courts, will soon join us on the discussion. The time limit for today's discussion, the topic of which is abolition of death penalty, this is what we are going to discuss, is 1 hour. Anyone who has any questions should type them in the feed that is below, and we could take it up in due course. So without wasting much time and adhering to the time limit of 1 hour, let me request Senior Advocate Geeta Luthra to begin a first round of a 10-minute comment. So in about 10 minutes, she'll lay the ground as well as share her opinions.
Right, Tarun, thank you. Thank you for having us. The debate about death penalty is so old and yet so important and so fresh that it's one of those evergreen subjects which I hope one day would no longer be a subject of discussion if death penalty were to be abolished. Now, when I speak of this, I want to say that death penalty was introduced by the Indian Penal Code 1860. So it is a British inheritance which we got. And in the country of its origin, which is the UK, it has been abolished. Now, one of the reasons, and I think it's very interesting to go into the background of why it was abolished in the UK. So there were a series of cases from 1949 till 1950. 3 cases, all important, all equally significant. One is the first Mr. Timothy Evans case, where a man was accused of murdering his wife. They had a child called Beverly. They had a neighbor called Christy. He suggested that since abortion was legal, his knowledge on abortion was great, he'd help him to abort the child. But he was actually a serial killer. This was unknown. While Timothy was away, Christy killed his wife and buried her somewhere in one of the many sheds in the house, which was number 10, I believe, Rillington Road. There's a movie on that in which David Attenborough acted, and it was later discovered he also killed the daughter. Evans, you run away because you'll be accused of getting your wife aborted, which is illegal in the UK, and you will be convicted. So the poor man ran away. Later discovered, many years later, the man whose wife stood testimony, and he was the only prosecution witness. So he was responsible for conviction and death penalty to Timothy. He murdered his wife. He had earlier murdered 2 other people. When the house was sold, somebody else came to occupy the house. They found 3 dead bodies in the yard. They found his wife's body, and he confessed to some of the crimes, to 5 of them. He didn't confess to Geraldine's death. Evans had already withdrawn, but he had been convicted. He had been hanged. Similarly, there were 2 other cases. One of a nightclub manager, Ellis, where there was a lot of public sympathy because she had to abort since her lover, David Blakely, was not being good to her. And she was accused of murdering him and convicted and given death penalty. There was another case when a person was mentally slightly retarded, and his friend who had taken him crack took him along. The friend, by accidentally killed this policeman or actually killed the policeman, but the person who was convicted, that friend Craig was under 16, so he, because of being a juvenile, he escaped death penalty, but this man was given death penalty. It was later realized by the doctors and psychiatrists that this man was mentally, firstly, he had not done anything himself, and second, he was held to be mentally somewhat incapacitated. This led to a furor in the UK, and they kept saying abolish death penalty because you can never be 100% sure if a person has done it. Now we have cases where, so as a result, it was abolished. Now coming to India. In India, trials are done with very little scientific evidence. Your evidence is based on a policeman or police personnel who do not use scientific means. People are convicted of murder, and sometimes it's circumstantial. Very frequently, it will be cases where there is also a sexual assault involved. So the question then is, if you can't be 100% sure, one, should it be something irreversible? Second, even if you can be 100% sure, the question is, what is the purpose of death penalty? Is it deterrence? Is it retributive? Is it reformative? And if it is either deterrence or reformative, all studies, including this 2000 to 2016 study by the National School, Delhi University, Delhi National University, has come to the conclusion that you can't really say it's deterrent. That death penalty is more deterrent than life imprisonment, unless you have some kind of empirical studies which will demonstrate that you don't have a right to give a life, so you don't have a right to take a life. That is the simple position. Now, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, all of them have said an eye for an eye is going to make the whole world blind. That's not your system. If you are looking at trying to punish people for their wrong, it is not death penalty which should be the answer. The answer could be deterrence. The answer could be an attempt at reform. The answer in a welfare state cannot be death penalty. Now, there may be a case which in logic there isn't for terror crimes, but that could still be an exception that could possibly be carved out. But can you do it for other crimes like murder, like POCSO, like rape, like all other crimes? So I don't want to exceed my time, but just to wind it up in a couple of minutes, what I want to say is that death penalty is not something which should be your goal. India was a signatory to abolishing death penalty, but in the recent UN General Assembly 2016, when they said there should be a moratorium, India went against the resolution. Then there was another, and there have been repeated UN resolutions. India is voting against the resolution. What and why is India one of those few democratic countries with a principle of rule of law being a welfare state which is every time repeatedly voting against abolishing death penalty? That is a question which we have to.
Some very important and pertinent points raised by Ma'am Geeta Luthra. And I remember a legally speaking discussion we did well over a year ago, because you pointed out scientific evidence here. And we did a discussion called ocular evidence versus DNA evidence. And I remember you citing some very important cases where DNA evidence was planted to implicate some people. And because we are not that good with scientific evidences, these things can be misused in a country like India. So indeed, very important. At this juncture, I'll go to Rubinder Guman. And Rubinder, could you make your points in about 8-10 minutes?
Sure. Sure. Tarun, just give me a sec, please. I think there's some network here. Yeah. Now, good evening, everybody. Death penalty should be there in India or should not be there in India is a debatable question since decades. Now, coming straight away to the ending note of Geeta Luthra ma'am, that death penalty should not be a deterrent theory. She's rightly said, penal provision is not based on deterrent theory of punishment. Rather, it is based on serving justice or serving justice. India gives death penalty not because of deterrent theory, but to serve the ends of justice. Now let's come to the cases of death penalty. Death penalty is not not given in ordinary cases. These are given in rarest of rarest case which strike the conscience of the people. Now let's take the cases of Nithari case. The man in that was a cannibal. Nirbhaya case. Now let's come to the very important case. This case has shook the conscience of the country. If I rightly remember, the then learned duty magistrate Surya Malik ma'am started rolling the ball vis-a-vis taking cognizance of the charge sheet. She could have given a bail or not. Whatever said and done, the matter lingered on till the very end or conclusion. After due trial, after the convicts had made an appeal in the High Court and the Honorable Supreme Court, a curative writ petition, the President's mercy petition, all this was exhausted, and yet they were delaying, and it took more than 14 years. Now, coming to the very moot point, do such hardened criminals require any mercy? Negative is the answer. In fact, I would say it served the ends of justice with the hanging. Now let's come on to Afzal Guru case or Parliament attack case. Can these people, can they be forgiven? The whole, the very identity, the very conscience of the people, the very security of the country is at stake. Let's look at let's talk about Bombay 9/11 case, Bombay blast case. Now, in this case, as everybody knows what happened, innocent people were killed. Now, if these hardened criminals / terrorists, they roam freely, will not only our army, but the people in general would be in fear. Now, that is the reason after a due trial, a very, our system holds a very, very balanced approach. It's very impartial. A due trial is held, even if it's a Pakistani crossover terrorist. And as per as the law, the courts give the verdict. He's given a due representation. Lawyers are presented. They represent their case. A due hearing is given. Honorable judges apply their mind. And thereafter, after reaching a conclusion, after seeing the facts of the case, a due trial, thereafter, the conclusion is given. And mind you, these are not simple people. It's again, I reiterate, these are the rarest of the rarest case. And even when the Supreme Court gives its final verdict, there is the option of a presidential appeal or mercy petition, after which the convict is hanged. So where is the system bias? It's all a very clean and superb system. We cannot demoralize the army. We cannot demoralize the public. Public sentiments are involved. Now, coming on to the very fact that human rights are violated in some cases and all, certainly not. Are these human beings? Moist cases, people in Jammu and Kashmir, the terrorists who cross across the borders of Jammu and Kashmir, killing our own very Indian army people. Coming to it, Tarun, is it not in India's interest that our security of the nation should be kept intact, and severe punishment and that of death is required? We are not that state like European nations who have got a open border. We are surrounded by two neighbors who have got with whom we have fought a number of wars, Pakistan and China. Now these people, they send their people across the borders within our country to create ruckus, to create a law and order problem. And for such people, certainly death penalty is only the answer after due trial. Now let's take, there is another example of NDPS Act also. These hardened criminals, just for a few pocket money, of a few lakhs, they would keep on supplying, selling NDPS materials. Now, such people who are taking the lives and who are destroying the lives of people directly or indirectly, do they require a mercy petition? No. Certainly no. Do they require leniency? Certainly no. After due application of mind, after a proper trial, does the court come to its conclusion? Are we suggesting? In no way, I'm sure none of the panelists will suggest that courts are not applying their mind. They are capable, they're well trained, they serve the end of justice. Therefore, death penalty, looking at the conditions, looking at our circumstances, looking at our internal security, looking at our neighborhood, we have to maintain it. In fact, it's sad that sometimes a few lawyers representing the accused, their dilatory tactics, using dilatory tactics, they try to later on put a petition that since a lot of time has passed, therefore the death penalty should be converted into life imprisonment. I'm sorry, this is a very wrong practice. The latest is Nirbhaya's case, in which lawyers explored ample of lacunas of law. I think to such criminals, to such hardened criminals who fall within the rarest of the rarest case, death penalty is a must. Ending with this, thank you so much, Tarun.
So, as I could sense from Robbie's points, he made two important points which he thought were relevant. Point number A, he based a large amount of his argument on terrorism, where he says that people who engage in terrorism are hardened, trained criminals and deserve no mercy. Point B, he took the example of the Nirbhaya case and the Nithari case, and then said that such criminals deserve no mercy. There are also examples like Charles Sobraj in the distant past, but I will allow my panelists to talk about all of that. May I go to Justice Iqbal Ansari and take his opinion on this issue?
Good evening. I had the disadvantage of not hearing in complete Madam Geeta Luthra, senior advocate. But whatever little I have heard, on the basis of that, I am making my presentation. You see, law is never static. It keeps changing. Perhaps today we cannot conceive of a situation where slavery will be allowed. But there was a time when the US Supreme Court itself had held slavery as valid under the Constitution. If we ask today, people will not even believe. Now, as far as death penalty is concerned, death penalty is not from the Indian Penal Code. The death penalty is from the English law itself, when it used to be, when the English law was applied in India. And the first, not first, one of the first cases will be Nand Kishore case, where it was known as the judicial killing, and the then Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Calcutta was sought to be impeached. Now, as far as penalty is concerned, we all know that there is one class of penalty which has been increased in the sense that one is life, and a simple sentence, rigorous imprisonment, and life, then death. Now, the Supreme Court came across a situation where they found that there may be a case where death sentence is not warranted. But if we give only life or death, then in that event, court may be forced to impose death sentence. And that's why a new category of sentence was laid down, and that was that it will be life, means it will be for the whole of the life with no remission, with no commutation of sentence, which is Rajiv Gandhi killer's case. Now, as far as the death sentence is concerned, it is, as a matter of fact, retributive. The Bible says that hate the sinner and not the hate the sin and not the sinner. Now the question is, when we go for death penalty, do we hate the sin or do we hate the sinner? In Narva's case, for instance, is her poor mother. She had been running from pillar to post, and every time she went thinking that the sentence will be executed, she found an application seeking interference by the court with the sentence of death. So her frustration we can understand. And she said, when ultimately I have seen, when she said that I am happy and satisfied that the perpetrators of the crime have been brought to justice. The question is, let me very frankly ask, do you think if we ask Nirvaya's mother today, are you happy that her perpetrators have been sentenced to death and they are no more? I'm sure the answer will be no, she is not happy. Because neither her daughter will be brought back, nor these killers, by merely putting them to death, we have achieved. So here, as I'm trying to present before you, is that this is something which is, we are hating the perpetrator. Had it been that hate the sinner as a sin and not the sinner, then in that event the death sentence should have finished the sin itself, and we should have felt happy that justice has been done, which is not the case. Here, over and above that, there is one more reason which impels me to think that perhaps death sentence is not an ideal situation. Legal history gives out a number of cases where it has been found that after the execution of the death sentence, the convict or the person who has been executed came out to be innocent. I will give you one such example, which is known as Saddon's case. The case had become so famous that the Attorney General of England was appearing in the trial court, which is the Crown's Court. The husband and wife, known as Saddons, were facing the trial. Male accused was being represented by a very, very famous barrister of those days, Lord Edward Marshall Corn. The case against them was that there was a lady, a spinster. In fact, she had been staying as a paying guest at the house of Saddon. She developed diarrhea. doctor had been treating her and ultimately she died. The doctor accordingly certified and she was buried. After some time, Seddon made a claim that this spinster had left her properties or bequeathed her movables, whatever it is, in favor of his son. So the relatives of this spinster made a complaint and the Scotland Yard came into action. They exhumed the dead body and put it through chemical tests. And it was then found that she died of arsenic. So I think many of you would be knowing that arsenic is one element which never dies or destroyed. It remains in the pore. And from the examination, chemical examination, which is known as Mars test, it was found that she had consumed arsenic. Question was whether it had been administered to her or she had taken it herself. Second question was whether the quantity of arsenic administered to her was such that it would have killed a person in the ordinary course of nature. Let me tell you what is the Mars test. In the Mars test, actually, when there is, supposing there is any compound has arsenic, and if you add some chemical and put a glass over that, you will find there is a soothing layer, just like kajal as we put apply on our hair. So that black soothing actually proved that there was arsenic in that particular compound. So Lord Edward Marshall Hall, while cross-examining the two scientists, brought them to admit that Mars test is a qualitative test. That means it can tell you that it has arsenic, a particular compound. But you will not be able to say, it's not a quantitative test, so you will not be able to say whether the quantity of arsenic was such that it would have killed the man or woman in the ordinary course of nature. Very bold argument. And eventually, because the defense had given evidence, and in the UK, when the defense gives evidence, they start the argument. Lord Edward Marshall Hall started his argument by pointing out to the jury that he said that I am very happy that the Crown is being represented by none other than the Attorney General of England. But he said that his presence is not a sign of the strength of the prosecution's case. It is rather the weakness of the prosecution's case, and that's why the Crown has thought it wiser to bring the weight of the office of the Attorney General to prosecute. Similarly, when the Attorney General was started, he said, I am very happy that Seddon had the good fortune of having been defended by Lord Edward Marshall Hall, one of the brightest barristers of the criminal side. So they both, and even after his defense, if you are satisfied in addressing the jury that this man is guilty, you should have absolutely no doubt that your conclusion is correct. The important thing which he said was that you have heard the scientists about the marvels of science, but there is one thing, and perhaps the tiniest thing, which science has not been able to discover, and that is called life. In your hands, ladies and gentlemen, you are holding the life of this man. If by any error of judgment you take away his life, and tomorrow you come to know that he was innocent, you will not be able to forgive yourself. The court proceedings record that one of the jurors fainted because the passion in the speech or address of Lord Edward Marshall Hall while appearing on behalf of the plainly accused was such degree. In any case, the jurors found him guilty and the judge sentenced him to death. Now that sentence he preferred his appeal, He went to the king also for seeking mercy. Everything failed and he was executed. Then his wife moved to America and settled there. After about 15 minutes, she was in an accident. And when she was brought to the hospital, she made a dying declaration. There she said her husband was completely innocent. And it was she, along with her daughter, that were the ones who had killed this woman by administering arsenic to her. And then there was a movement in UK that in Saddam's case, Saddam was not executed because of the fact that Crown succeeded in proving the case against him, but because of the fact that he failed to prove his innocence. And in this particular trial, we have inadvertently brought the French criminal justice system, which puts the burden of proof on the accused. Because in this particular case, Saddam had such a facial expression all through the trial, which gave an impression to the jurors that he was a very cruel and cruel person. So this is one of the cases I'm citing. Now, when we, by way of death sentence, if there could have been foolproof death sentence, perhaps one could not have objected. But when we know that there is an element of possibility of the person executed being innocent, and if he is executed, can we forgive ourselves? I don't think so. Once we, and this has happened even in our Supreme Court. I think that case is, if I have not made a mistake, it's Ankush Maruti Shinde. Here there were 6 accused who had been convicted and sentenced to death by the Sessions Court. The High Court made 3 death sentences and 3 were given life for 10 years, something like that. When the matter went to the Supreme, this is of 2019. When the matter went to the Supreme Court gave all the 6 death sentences. Then the matter came up for review. And on review, the Supreme Court found that the conviction was wrong. And then the review application was taken up and the conviction was set aside. Now imagine a situation that they would have been executed. Then could we have given them back their life? It is 2019, which is giving us very clear example that there is possibility, a reasonable possibility of an innocent man being hanged to death. So there are other cases also that will take time. That's why I'm not going into those cases. And but my idea would be in regard to the kind of situation that the society is facing, and more particularly because death sentence has not led into the reduction of crime. For instance, murder has always been punishable by death. Murder has not come down because of the fact that death sentence is there. So I would say that in my humble view, the death and penalty of death sentence should be abolished. If there is a case which calls for death sentence or rarest of rare case, then in that event, such a case can be punished by imprisonment.
As usual, as I could see, a very, very interesting case brought forth by Justice Ansari, as well as he also shares interesting anecdotes with us. Even yesterday, he did so in one of the discussions that we had. Thank you so much for sharing these cases with us. Of course, it's very useful for all our panelists. Now, may I go to Ma'am Geeta Luthra for another 10 minutes round, because we have 29 minutes left to go. Ma'am, in about 10 to 12 minutes, could you share your opinions on this issue, please?
Tarun, I guess Aman Sareen is also joined.
Has he joined us? Okay, then we will go to Aman Sareen, followed by Ma'am Geeta Luthra. Let Aman Sareen make his first note, and then we'll go to Ma'am Geeta Luthra, and then she'll make her 10-minute note. Aman, are you in? I can't hear Aman.
Even I can't see him here on the board.
He probably will not be on the board. He'll be speaking through voice.
No, but my mic is open. Is he online? Because when I speak, I don't get any response. Aman, are you there on the feed?
His name is also not reflecting, Professor.
Very well. I think Geeta ma'am can do it. I'll just try to contact him.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
So good. So we get to listen to Ma'am Geeta Luthra a bit more. Could you please start your opinion, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Tarun. Tarun, I think let's just look at the history in India, because that's what's been interesting. In fact, the last few years have been very interesting, ending with a very recent dissent by Justice Kurian Joseph, where he said that let's look whether we need to abolish death penalty. And in the same case, which is, I think it's C.L. Verma's case, where in the same case, Justice Hemant Gupta and Justice Deepak Gupta have disagreed and said, look, Machi and Bachan Singh have laid the law and there's no reason for a review. Now, if we look at, I'm going backwards in Urdu style only because this is the latest position. There's also a very recent judgment by the bench of Justice Nageshwar Rao, where again, they've commuted death penalty, and the judgment, in terms of the judgment of Shraddhanand, quoted by Justice Ansari, where he said it should not be life, should not be 14 years, it should life be till end of life, because then you may want to then not give death penalty. Sometimes death penalty is given because you don't want the person to go away with the remission after 12 years or 14 years. So that's the last judgment Justice Nageshwar Rao's bench has given is that judgment. Before that was the judgment of C.L. Verma. Now, if you go even earlier than that, then you will see that there are cases where there has been gross delay. If you look at the statistics, which the National Law School has brought up, you will see that there are people who are languishing on death row for 21 years, for 16 years. And the question then arises is it fair? This is giving them double punishment. First, you keep a sword over their head for 21 years or 16 years, and then you give them death penalty. All these persons in various prisons have been interviewed. One of them, for example, came up saying that he was tortured by the police to agree to the fact that he had killed a member of his extended family when he is completely innocent and he had nothing. And he said he was tortured, the snake was put in his room, and that's the manner in which he says, he was asked to admit to a crime which he's never done. Now look at the statistics, they are shocking. In 60 cases that Supreme Court has upheld conviction to being death penalty, in 25% of them in review. And fortunately, the Supreme Court has said that it will be an open review in cases of capital punishment. In 25% of them, that is in 15 of those 60 cases, Supreme Court has then set aside the death penalty. If there is that room of 25%, that's a lot of room. Then the question, and I've done some matters personally, in fact, where for a long period, the person had been, those two people had been facing death row, the evidence was circumstantial. And to my mind, not something which should accept that it resulted. And I believe that it could have been possible that there was falsification for property reasons. But what happened was, fortunately, on grounds of delay, the Supreme Court then commuted the death penalty, which it has done recently in many cases, and we are happy about it, although there were two views. Should delay count? Should it not count? So fortunately now it has come to a conclusion that such long Damocles sword hanging over a person, that delay should count for them to be able to file a writ petition under Article 32. Now, if we come to other aspects, is age a factor? According to me, age is a factor, because if our jails were meant like hospitals and were meant to reform people, which is why we have the Juvenile Justice Act, because you imagine that the juveniles can be reformed. Same ethos can go for young people who commit first-time offenses. Then can you reform them? If there's a possibility of reform, should the jails be able to study them, see their conduct, see their positive conduct? And should age then be an ameliorating factor, or should it not? If at all we are not abolishing death penalty, I'm saying. These are some aspects which I believe, look, one last word which I feel is very important. In Bachchan, the Supreme Court says, in the rare, you would give death penalty in the rarest of rare cases where the collective conscience is troubled. Now I'm very bothered by this expression, collective conscience. What is collective conscience? Is it media trial? What is collective conscience? It has to be the objective conscience of the court based on the criteria that the courts have laid down. It can't be a collective conscience. The collective conscience expression, to my mind, can be something which, some cases which are heinous may catch the eye of the public. Other cases which are equally heinous may not catch the eye. And this was a comparison drawn in the UK, in that Ellis case, where she was the manager of a nightclub. And there was a 50, 60-year-old woman who also seemed to be having a case for compassion and for pardon. The question that came up was, if someone's presentable, attractive, invokes sympathy, then perhaps there will be a greater consideration of her case. So we can't look at collective conscience. We have to look at the conscience of the court, which looks at the factors in as objective a manner as is possible. Now, the Supreme Court at the present has a petition pending, because some, contrary to the guidelines laid down in Shatrughan Chauhan's case, there is a prayer which is being made that instead of 14 days period before you do an execution, it should be 7 days. And certain other parameters for mercy petition, timelines, etc., to take away delay. But the question here foremost is, are we doing death penalty because we are not treating it as a state case, and we are treating as a case where there is no rights of a victim and the rights are of a complainant? That is why these cases were state cases. And that is why India had always felt that the complainant's role is a very, is a role where they can give written submissions, but they cannot have that major participative role. Today, because there is an apprehension that prosecution may not be completely forthright, that you are giving bigger and bigger roles to complainant. But it has to be restricted so that it is the conscience of the court that is looking and not collective conscience of a. That is what a criminal prosecution is about.
Tarun,
Thank
can I
you
just
so
speak for a minute? Since
Of
it's a
course,
debate.
I will let you come in. First, I'd like to thank for always a very profound opinion or a statement that comes from you. This will be useful to a lot of people who have watched this today. Robbie wanted to come in. Robbie, please, in about 3 to 4 minutes or 5 minutes, do make your point also. And you have to come in on something. Please do that also.
Please, since it's a debate, with all due respect to Geeta ma'am and Justice Ansari, both of them are very great speakers, and we always tend to learn from them. And just putting across my point after having listened to them, since it's a debate. Now, Justice Ansari said on the concept and basis arguments or his lecture that is it a sin or a sinner who has to be condemned? Now, there is just a bit of a silver lining between difference between the two. Is it the crime or the criminal which has to be hated, or which has to be punished? Is the word, if I may say so. Now, one instance was given by one of our panelists, Geeta ma'am, that the accused often take the plea that he's been tortured and all that. Maybe yes, so, in many cases it must have been. But let's not forget and lose sight of the very fact that under 163, the statement the accused is produced before the magistrate and his confessional statement is recorded. So obviously, there the accused is free to give without any pressure, without any duress or influence his statement. And this question of law has been upheld in the very Supreme Court too. Ours is a very robust judicial system, and across the world, it's been hailed and applauded. Um, Due trial takes place, cross-examination takes place. The lawyers who are often heavily paid and well reputed and well known lawyers are engaged in such type of cases, and therefore I would say it's not a lacuna. It's not to the handicap of an accused having he having been apart from state legal help also. It's not that he goes undefended. So all the due process is followed, and we must respect the verdict of a judiciary. And not only that, after the entire process, judicial process is taken place and the verdict given, we have the presidential pardon too. It's only when all these are rejected and the case falls within the purview of rares of the rarest case, does a person be given death penalty, and in some cases, of course, death penalty is executed. And that's all I would like to say. Thank you. Over to you, Tarun.
Okay. I think, thank you, Robbie, for the intervention you made. I see you were a lot on procedure. Ma'am Geeta Luthra came from a lot of principle of law. But moving ahead at this point, we have about 14 minutes left. And I would like to take in about 3 minutes each a round of closing comments from each our panelists. May I request Justice Ansari to sum up in about 3.5 minutes his thoughts on the subject.
Well, as usual, Madam Geeta Luthra advocacy is proved. Of that there is no dispute. But what I am trying to say is that, and that I take it from Nirbhaya's case only, when the death sentence was pending execution, every time she was asked, she says, I want justice. And after the execution was done, thereafter she has been interviewed again. And now she says, are you happy? She says, no, how could I be? My daughter will not be brought back. And the kind of brutality which she has undergone, no mother will forgive. So that's what I am saying, that at the end of the day, It is the sinner whom we are hating and not the sin, because the sin will remain. And that's what it is, and more so because there is another case in India. I don't know if time will be available with us or not. It will take about 5 minutes, 4 minutes maybe. Can we try? Hello?
Yes,
Can
yes,
we-
yes, yes,
Yes, armored code of the army. It's a case where a person was, two persons were court-martialed. On the 4th of April, if I'm not incorrect, a dead body was found. Adjacent to the cantonment was a tea estate. And in the tea garden, a dead body was found. And the military police were called. Then an alert was sounded to all the units in the cantonment to take the head count. The head count were taken, and everybody was found to be available. And the civil military police also went back by saying that this is not a case involving army. But the strange part was, before the police arrived, civil police, and after the army, the military police had left, somebody removed the head, and that head could not be found out. So the postmortem was performed on the torso. After 3 days or 4 days, I don't exactly recollect, most probably 7th of April, the head was found. But by that time, somebody had taken the pain of completely disfiguring the face so that the person cannot be recognized. When this was pending, a letter was received from another gentleman, whose name was Vishnu Dayal. This letter said that you have not come. It was in annual leave, and you have not sent any money. As you all know, in the army, the letters are censored. So when it was censored, this was found. So the unit wrote back by saying that the man had already gone for leave, and he is in fact overstaying leave. And there is a deserter roll which has been published. Deserter roll, you may be knowing, if for 10 days a person does not return from leave, then deserter roll is published, and wherever he is found, he is arrested. So his brother was also in the army, he came. And he was making inquiries. An intelligence officer was present in the office of the commanding officer, not commanding officer, camp commander. And he developed some suspicion. Interestingly, he went to the local railway station because that was the means of transport of this Vishnu Dayal. Because there used to be a bus which left the cantonment and dropped the passengers at the railway station. So he went to the MCO and inquired from the MCO if the warrant has been exchanged. We tell you that there is a warrant which is issued for every passenger, and that warrant has to be presented with the MCO before the MCO. You must have seen in the railway station MCO. And in exchange of that warrant, you are given a ticket. So it was found that warrant has not been exchanged. So the deduction was that Vishnu Dayal has never left the cantonment. Whereas there were many people who said that no, we in our presence, we told everybody goodbye and then boarded the bus and went. So then a search started as to who was seen last. So there was one name figured. That was Satyavir Singh, a very handsome person. He was brought and must have been, according to what Satyavir says, tortured also. So he made a confession, but his confession was very peculiar. He did not said anything which has been done by him. He alleged everything which his company known as Jutaram had allegedly done. He said that Jutaram came when we were waiting for the bus to come. He said that let us have a drink and I have some snacks. So then they went to the hall where they were sitting. So Vishnu Dayal was, Satyabir says that Jutaram went out and he came with the towel and suddenly started giving blows on the neck of Vishnu Dayal and killed him. According to Satyabir's statement, he said that my head started reeling. I went to the roof and from the terrace, to the terrace, this Jutaram came and he said, "You have seen what I have done. If you don't help me, I will kill you also." So he says, I helped him in burying the dead body in the cantonment. That is how the dead body was found. And later on, that some jackal or something must have led to the recovery of that. As far as the disfiguring is concerned, I'm not going into the facts, but then he admitted that this disfiguring was also done at the instance Jutaram and his senior officers. So when the trial was to take place, the defense raised an argument that you are holding a lot way. If you hold Jutaram as guilty of murder, you will not be able to try Satyavir for murder. Court martial decided on the basis of the advice given by the convening authority to go ahead with the trial of Jutaram and the charge of murder and removal of dead body. And both accounts he was convicted and given life sentence. When we came out, it was about 9:30 at night when the sentence was, conviction was announced. And the court asked that please find out from him if he wants to give me any mitigation of his sentence. So when we came out, I asked Jutaram that what you want to say, because whatever I could have done, I have done. Now it is up to you. Whatever statement you want to make, you can make the statement. He says, please ask them to give me death sentence because I would not like to live his entire life in jail, and I will prefer to die. When the court reassembled, I told them that he is asking for the harshest of punishment which this court is competent to give, and this is the sentence of death. So the court was aghast. Anyway, he was given life imprisonment. When Satyavir's trial took place, then obviously the army had to drop the charge of murder against Satyavir. But when the trial started, it started coming out very clearly that it was Satyavir who had actually killed and Jutaram was entirely innocent, which Jutaram had been claiming. Then convening authority they reduced the sentence to 7 years or something, which they could not have done. The High Court released him on bail. Thereafter, I don't know what happened. But what I'm trying to point out is this. Jutaram, who had been guilty, he was not guilty because even according to convening authority, he was given life imprisonment. Now, how one will feel if I am innocent and I give life to jail? That is why, since we cannot, after all, these are human institutions, and since we cannot avoid, I am not telling the part of Satyavir because of paucity of time. Otherwise, it's just like a movie. And you will find that Satyavir received only 3 years of imprisonment, whereas Jutaram, who was innocent, he got the life imprisonment. Now, I am not being a person belonging to Tukre gang, but let me point out, in the case of this person, Afzal Guru, he filed a curative petition. It's a matter of record. That curative petition came up obviously before the same bench, that is Justice Joseph and Justice Sattavik. Because there was a difference of opinion between the two. Obviously, this curative petition was required to be decided by the third judge. In the meanwhile, his mercy petition failed, which he challenged before the Supreme Court. And this was resisted by the government of India. And as we all know, at late hours of the night, this petition was heard, his application was dismissed, and his sentence was executed. But you would be surprised to hear that his curative application is still pending. Now, if somebody asks us, because Supreme Court judgments will not stop the academic pursuits, and what we are doing basically is academic pursuit. So academically, if somebody asks us what will happen to that curative petition, we will have no answer. Maybe the curative petition had succeeded, we don't know. So, on the basis of all this, which I say, I am fully convinced that death sentence is something which we must avoid. Yes, life you can take as life, and the whole of the life without any commutation or remission should be.
So as usual, Justice Ansari gives us anecdotes, cases which shake us to the core, and also ponder us to think over our criminal justice system. Earlier too, I have seen him coming up with such cases which in fact force us to think. Now he's forced us to think on the death penalty itself with two anecdotes and two cases that he shared with us. Jhutaram's case is a case in point. Also Afzal's Guru's case, which he shared with us now. Since we have just 2 minutes to our closing time, may I request Ma'am Geeta Luthra to close this discussion with her final point and summing up the discussion in what she thinks has been, in a sense, the essence of today's discussion.
So the first thing I want to say is India is one of the 14 countries that legalizes death penalty. And we are in this with very interesting company, China, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Iran. This is 4 out of those 14. These are the countries. Do we want to be with these countries on this issue when our law commission has recommended us? The last word which I think would be interesting is that if our investigation was better, what we are looking at is greater deterrence and reform. If our investigation was better, our rate of conviction would be higher. That is what we have to look at, and not a death penalty as a deterrence, because that's not proved. Instead, improve your investigation, make the investigation more scientific, and Nirbhay shows the way that India is capable of doing that, instead of India coming around and saying we want it to be deterrent, and therefore death penalty is a deterrence, which it is unproven. Maybe having said that we should be concerned about the country, I agree with it. We have to be concerned about the country, but the rule of law is supreme. We are a welfare country. We are a country where we have the right to life and liberty. We cannot take that away unless we are sure. And that also, even if we are sure, the question that arises is in terms of Martin Luther King. Can you take away eye for eye, as Gandhi and Martin Luther have said, tooth for tooth? That would make the whole world blind and would serve no purpose. So That, of course, is mine and Justice Ansari's viewpoint. Robbie robustly stands with what he believes, that death penalty should continue, and we robustly say we disagree with him.
So as usual, as usual, beautifully summed up by Ma'am Geeta Luthra. I could say today's discussion was a discussion of procedure by Robbie versus principle by Justice Ansari and Ma'am Geeta Luthra. I'd like to share a bit of anecdote. Generally on my shows, it is Justice Ansari who has the last word. For the first time, Ma'am Geeta Luthra has had the last word. So I think this has happened for the first time in 3 years. So this is an exception. But I would like to thank so much, Ma'am Geeta. Huh?
She is our Gavaskar, that's why.
So,
As I said, she's our Gavaskar, that's why.
but I would like to thank so much, Ma'am Geeta Luthra, for sparing her time, Justice Ansari for sparing your time, and Rubinder Guman for organizing this in coordination with Nitesh, who set up all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a good, nice weather outside, and because Justice Ansari mentioned something about having a drink, I should go and get my gin and tonic now. Thank you so much, all of you, ladies and gentlemen, who joined us today. Thank you for joining this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Tarun.
Thank you.